Today, we will talk about the importance of being out in nature and observing everyday objects. Whenever I'm walking outside, one thing that really stops me is repeating pattern and texture in nature, and I can look at them for hours. It's very meditative and it makes me feel one with nature. It feels like I'm part of this big plan. There must be a reason I have been put on this earth, and it's going to be beyond my capacity to know it in my entirety. Like why I am here, what's the purpose. But my goal is to know and experience what my I am experiencing right now. The hope is that eventually I will figure out my path. Eventually all of us will figure out our own path. And if not in this life, then maybe in next life. But to keep searching, to keep aspiring for that path for which we are meant to be, for which we were born on this earth. With that being said, I would like to share some of the pictures which I'm really inspired by and I would like to paint someday. All right. All right. So this is one of the apple bunch which I came across when I was out in mountains with my current fiance Pankaj. We often go to this winery. The name of the winery is Blue Mount. It's in Virginia. We often go there just to look at the mountains. Basically, it's up in the hills. There are trees of grapes and there are trees of apples nearby. One of the reasons I felt honestly inspired by this particular picture was the transparency of the leaves, the violet that's showing through the leaves here on the nerves of the leaves. And then apples were really small, but they had a high chroma with them. So they were violet mostly, and with some amount of reds in them. This is another picture of rocks. I often go outside when I'm in lunch or to take a walk outside. And these are two rocks which are very near Seaways in Virginia. The reason I love this is because, firstly, because of texture. There's a lot of texture in there, and it will look beautiful and wonderful in a abstract painting. The second reason I like this is because of the colors. So the colors are earthy, they are warm, they help me feel grounded. I don't see this color anywhere outside nature easily. I love the burnt sienna in here and also the gray. How gray is little bit violetish is extremely interesting. Also, this particular wall, this is the wall of the Seviers, Saint Seviers. And I really like this burnt sienna kind of color in here within this rock, basically. When we were young, my wall, the boundary wall which covered my childhood home, was of this color, and I always felt somehow attracted to it, amazed by it. So I thought I will capture this and probably eventually I will create a abstract painting with this as inspiration in mind, but not, of course, exactly the same picture. This is a iris sponge which I saw in a neighbor's yard, and it will look really beautiful when painted with oil colors. So this is also one of my inspirations. So yes, it's really nice to be outside and find inspiration in nature. It will help you connect with nature if nothing else. With that being said, we will move on to the second part. The second part of the video is going to be about the apples that I painted. I will share the video with you. I will also like you guys to come and paint with me. What I'm going to do is I will have two links at the bottom of the video. So you will find the picture that inspired me, the apple picture that inspired me to paint this. And if you are good at sketching, if you want to sketch, I will ask you to sketch it yourself. Do one thing, go to Michael's this week, or if you are in other country apart from US, go to any nearby store where you can find watercolor paper and get a watercolor paper which is at least 11 cross 10 or something like that in dimensions, and bigger than A4 size or at least A4 size, and sketch this if you are good at sketching. If not, I have also linked the sketch below, so you can download it and then maybe copy it on the watercolor paper that you are gonna buy. The second part is, if you don't already have watercolors, buy the cheapest watercolors that you can find just to see if it inspires you, if it is fun for you to paint with watercolors. You can actually paint with Winsor and Newton watercolors. I'm not sure if you're able to say this, but you can use Winsor and Newton watercolors. They're not very cheap, but they are mid-range. If not, you can also use Artist Loft. So they should be around 10 to 12 bucks on Amazon, maybe a little bit costlier now. Also, you can use the basic brushes for this particular painting. The idea is just to feel happy, just to feel connected, and just to be in flow, honestly. So that's the idea of the painting. With that being said, I'm gonna share the video with you. I'm not able to paint this fast as me. This full painting took across 3 hours for me to paint. And honestly, I was surprised with it. I thought I might be able to paint it within an hour or so. So it took full 3 hours. The colors that I'm using for background are yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, sap green, and viridian hue. You can use different colors as well, just use earthy tones and cooler greens as well as warmer greens. I'm using cooler greens in the areas where there is more shadow. And so if you will observe shadow, right? If you go outside and observe shadow, you'll feel, and even in shadow, right? Just intuitively, in shadow, you feel cooler. That's why the colors in shadow are cooler colors. When you are not in shadow, it's little bit warmer, and that's why the colors that you use are little bit warmer. So it's easy to think of it as a beginner at least. I was really happy with the way background is painted, at least right now at this stage. Now we are gonna start with the apples. We all know that apples are red, but as an artist, we have to think about it differently. If you look closer, right, on the apple, if you pay attention, you will see there is lot of violets in there. There is lot of orange in there, maybe some red, some white, and even black. So, one of the tasks as an artist is to improve your observational skill. And secondly, also look for the things that you like. Like I like violets in these apples, and I'm gonna emphasize them. But you might be the person who likes yellow in the apples more, and you might emphasize that in your paintings, right? So increase your observational skills, but at the same time, be open to experiment. The colors that I used here are crimson, also cadmium red, some amount of dioxide purple, as well as Pines Gray. So I'm mixing Pines Gray with violet where shadow is falling on those apples. Also, one thing that I would like to mention is I'm using a little bit of salt and drizzling it over the apple once the apple is painted to create texture. And you will see how beautiful it turned out, right? Like This is watercolors, so whenever you put salt on it, once the colors are dried, it will be very easy to remove. And at this stage, I have removed the salt, so you can see that um, there are patches or highlights of little bit of white in there now, which create texture-like feeling. Now I'm painting the grains. For grains, again, I'm starting with lighter colors because these are watercolors. In case of watercolors, we want to use lighter colors first and then after paint the darker colors, which is opposite in the case of oils or acrylic colors. In acrylic colors or oils, you paint the dark first and then after you go ahead and start painting with the lights. All right. So we already talked about one thing which helps when you are painting everyday object is being close to the nature. The second part is once you are painting something that you already know, right? Like an apple, like an egg, like a butterfly, you already know them. You have painted them as a child. But what you did at that time is, let's say if you were painting mountains, they look like cone. If you were painting eggs, they were of the same color all over. So now you have an opportunity to observe it closer and hence increase your technical skills. You can pay attention at the form, the shadows, the value, as well as the color of the object, and it will increase your skills. Also, the third part of the situation is when you're painting anything that's every day, it will remove the artistic block, it will remove the pressure on you to painting something extraordinary that has inspired you. When you're painting something ordinary, you are concentrating more on the process rather than the outcome. And that way, let's say you haven't painted in 3 months, it is going to become easier to come back to painting when you decide to paint something small, something everyday, something not extremely big, right? Something like an egg or like sunflower, which Venga often painted. So I'm using darker green in here in those areas where shadow is falling. One thing I honestly didn't like was in the painting while I was in the midway was I painted the background green and then my leaves were green as well. What I could have done instead is either painted my greens or the greens of the leaves with more opaque colors. So I could have used gouache colors in there to increase the opacity and hence being able to distinguish with the background. I could have used a single color in the background. That was the second option. Or I could have painted the leaves in blue because value is more important than the color itself. So I could have used variation of blues in there for the leaves. So don't worry about making mistakes in the painting. You can always improvise later. And I did improvise later. So I will tell you what I did later towards the end of the video to make this satisfactory, something that I felt happy with. Within these leaves, what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to do some amount of line work. So when I observe a leaf, you will see the nerves of the leaves are visible as well, and I find them extremely beautiful. So I try to paint those nerves, uh, not line by line on not every single line, but something which looked more like layers, something which simplified the shape, but at the same time let it remain intact. For the twigs, I'm using gouache color just because they are not very transparent. The twigs of the plant are not as transparent, at least as the leaves. So I decided to use gouache. I'm using mix of blues and violets in there and some amount of brown as well, honestly. All right. So this particular leaf, for this leaf, I have painted it in brownish ashy color because the dried leaf is somewhat more opaque than the non-dried leaf. And I like how it turned out. This is extremely interesting. I like how some of the leaves, right? Some of the green leaves, you will see that they have almost violet nerves in them. And I always feel extremely attracted to those nerves within green leaves. I'm painting some of I wanted the nerves to be darker so that we can distinguish. So I painted some nerves in blue. Now we are creating almost outline. I am painting outline for the apples. There were two options. One thing I could done has I could have saturated the apples more with violets and reds, but I liked how they were transparent, almost allowing light to pass through them. So I decided I would rather do
I'm gonna
outline than. Let's see how the painting turned out. Um, okay. So this is the final picture, something I did towards the end, which I wasn't able to record. My phone got switched off, and I wasn't really able to record this. Is I painted the background again. I added some yellow ochre in there. This was done so that green can be easily distinguished against the background. The green of the leaves can be easily distinguished against the background. And yeah, I love the leaves. I love how apples turned out. All right, so go ahead. All right, so go ahead and paint these apples this week. And if you don't want to paint these apples, paint any other apples or maybe even an egg. But paint something this week and do it just for the fun. Don't do it to show it to anybody else.